Things and locations in Final Fantasy XVI that reminded me of other Final Fantasy games. You may not see the similarity, and that's okay. These are my opinion. Spoilers are noted for Final Fantasy 9, 10, and 16. Starting off with this guy in the hideaway, his name is Spoony Bard, which very obviously comes from Final Fantasy IV when this character calls Edward a Spoony Bard. This is inside of Drake's Breath, and while we are walking through it, I just kept thinking, am I inside of the Fire Cavern from Final Fantasy VIII? They are not identical, but they both look similar. This is a scene from the beginning of the game with young Jill and young Clive, and this reminded me of Final Fantasy VIII when Quistis and Squall are talking, the bright white moon, and then the bright lights from the garden in the back, and very specifically the way that Squall and Clive are both leaning against the railing thing. That reminded me of each other. This is in Rosalith. The archways and buildings here reminded me of the archway and buildings in Final Fantasy IX inside of Alexandria. I didn't want to show too many pictures of this location, but to me they looked very similar. And this is also in Rosalith, but this is on top of the rooftops where Clive is walking, and this also reminded me of Alexandria when Vivi is walking on top of the rooftops. So the shingles are very similar here. This one is probably just me, but for some reason when I saw this, I immediately thought to Final Fantasy IX when Zidane is walking through Evil Forest, and then an FMV starts where it pans to this tree with a plant growing and glowing red. And I think it's the glowing red light and the pointy petals of the plant that reminded me also of this Heart of the Mother Crystal. This is outside of a castle in 16, and I immediately thought of Final Fantasy IX when Princess Garnet is sitting in her room by the window. Specifically, the red carpet in 16 reminded me of the red carpet in 9, and I don't know why. I remembered that the carpet was red, but I was like, oh, Garnet in her room. This is Gav drinking and having an emotional moment. So of course I thought of Zidane from Final Fantasy IX. If you notice the hair, they both have blonde hair with the pigtail in the back. I mean, Gav has 3 and Zidane has 1, but I thought that was really interesting. The hunt board in 16 reminds me very obviously of the hunt board in Final Fantasy XII. I think they look alike and the concept is the same. The Dalmatian Republic, this is the first time we see this desert, which reminded me of Dalmasca. They also have similar names, Dalmatian, Dalmasca, the blue sky, the sand, and the treasure chest in 12, especially in this area. They are scattered through the desert at an angle, just like the Fallen Ruin is at the top picture, so I thought that was interesting. This is a city in the Dalmatian Republic, or I guess a town, and the aesthetic of it reminded me of Raminaster. They have similar colors, lots of merchants, lots of like straight edged buildings and patterns everywhere and a lot of texture. The Stolas, or the messenger bird from 16, reminded me of the owl from 13. I found it interesting that they both had an owl, so I don't want to explain more without spoilers. This is inside the Crystalline Dominion, and what reminded me here of Final Fantasy X was that they have the same colors and glittery glow like the Macalania Woods, and also at the bottom of the lake, they are all just sort of standing there and waiting for Titus to talk to them, and same here in 16. They are waiting for Clive to talk to them. This is a combination of both locations around Macalania, the woods, and the lake. Hall of the Gate, Relic of the Fallen. When we entered this location, I don't know what it is about it. Maybe it's the colors and the perspective here, but I thought of this in Final Fantasy X when we were walking through this hallway inside of the Cloister of Trials. I think the angle, the camera angle, the fact that we're going through this hallway just like Clive and Jill, and then the colors, they all seem similar to me. This is right outside of the Hall of the Gate, Relic of the Fallen, and the idea and the concept, as well as the intricate design and textures of the door, reminded me of Final Fantasy X, and how Yuna also has to go inside of this room, which is a Chamber of the Faith, and just like Joshua would have had to do, she's talking to the Faith and asking for strength and power. And the doors are not similar, but the idea is. Inside of Kupka's castle, there is this rug on the floor, so that made me think of Besaid Temple. I think this is a rug, or it might be part of the floor, but I don't know. But either way, the circular design and then the patterns and colors reminded me of each other. So spoilers start here for Final Fantasy IX, 10, and 16. This is another one that might just be me, but inside of Drake's head, when we got to this gate, and then seeing the crystal in the background, it reminded me of this area in Final Fantasy IX. The gates are obviously different and the colors are different, but the vibe was the same, like this floor leading to a gate further back, and then the crystal shards in 9 that are kind of drifting in space, and then all of the mother crystal kind of just there. Something about it reminded me of each other. This is a location in Final Fantasy XVI called the Final Sin, which reminded me of Sin from Final Fantasy X, specifically this moment in the game where the water is parted and this big wave of water attacks us. So visually, and also because of the name Final Sin, this reminds me of 10. This is a sketch that Mid and Sid created for the ship they want to build called the Enterprise, and this is the Enterprise from Final Fantasy IV. Not identical, but they have the same name, and I mean they look similar enough. This is the end of Final Fantasy XVI, one of the final areas that we go to. And so here, the dungeon itself with the dome and the repeating lines and curves of the dome, along with Ultima's design and the colors, reminded me of Final Fantasy IX. It's not circular, but you can tell that it does curve because of the way that the lines are moving, and just like that repeating pattern reminded me of the one in 16. And if you look at the 9 final boss and then 16's final boss, they both look alike. I mean, they don't and they do. They have that same iridescent coloring, the blue arms on the side. It's very weird that this looks so much alike, but I definitely noticed it. Origin in 16, right away I thought of Cocoon, especially in 10 and 13 too. In New Bodom, I believe this is called. I haven't played this game in a while, but yeah, these two reminded me of each other. This is one that you have to kind of remember what the FMV looked like in Final Fantasy X, but here is Origin, that big crystal getting destroyed. And in Final Fantasy X, at the end, it's nighttime, there's all these stars in the background, and when Yuna is performing the final sending, all of her aeons are just kind of disappearing also, almost like shattering, and then Sin also just shatters, so that reminded me of this scene in 16. This is the last one. This is the final boss. I think it's just like a really quick scene, but I immediately thought of this boss in Final Fantasy X. They are not identical, I know, but the circles, the repeating circles, they reminded me of each other. And that is what I saw in Final Fantasy XVI that reminded me of other Final Fantasy games. This was my first playthrough. I want to replay it again, so maybe I will catch more things later on.